Hello my dear sewing friends, it's Alisa here and welcome to this spring cleaning / decluttering series. Now don't worry, you did click on the correct channel. It's still all about thoughtful and creative sewing, but a big part of that is the space where we do it, the materials that we accumulate, and also that chaos that sometimes creeps in. In this series you will see 5 episodes, 1 for each Friday in the month of March. And if you're watching this after the original release date, definitely check the description underneath this video. All of the episodes will be linked right there. When doing my spring cleaning, I like to divide it in 4 different stages. Stage number 1 was to purge, and that's what we did last time. So today we're on to stage number 2, which is to organize. So when it comes to organizing, I do have quite a few areas to tackle today. One of them is the pegboard that you see right behind me. Then of course the bookshelf, the square cubby, the fabric, craft supplies, and then fabric scraps as well. And in the previous episode, which was episode number 1 of the series when we did a lot of decluttering, I started with the pegboard. But today I feel inspired to just get it done and over with when it comes to fabric, because although I do like to keep it quite organized, throughout the year, you go through the rotation of fabric, different seasons of your sewing and your creative ideas and whatnot, so it does get mixed up. So it's time to just sort of get it all out on the table and then sort it out the way it should be. Now first I'm going to empty all of the tubs and get the fabric all out on the table. At first it is going to look like a big mess, but I do find that it's much easier to work that way, so that way you can see what you have, you can see the amount, and you can go from there. Now I would say that this right now is about 85% of all of the fabric that I have in my fabric stash. I do have some extra, like for example in the square cubby, but for right now, one step at a time, I'm going to focus on this. When everything was in those plastic tubs, it doesn't really seem like a lot, right? But once you pour it all out on the table, that reality definitely creeps in, and I'm looking at it and it's like, wow, okay, that is a lot of fabric, isn't it? And it's definitely enough probably for at least a year, if not more, of uninterrupted sewing for both me and my daughter, and occasionally for my husband. So once in a while, I feel that it's really good to do this sort of reality check, so that way you can see the amount, you can visualize it, and then therefore you can keep yourself in check when you're trying to hunt for that next shiny thing at the fabric shop. Then you start thinking, oh, wait a second, but I do have that next shiny thing, just not in the shop, but actually in my fabric stash. The goal here is to sort this fabric into these tubs in a manner that would make it easier to access and easier to manage. So you know how I always say that if you're not sure where to start with the most obvious thing, the thing that jumps right at you. And for me currently, that is a separate tub for my daughter's fabric. The fabric with really fun kids prints, or the one that I specifically bought to make something for her. Because oftentimes what I've noticed is that they're mixed in with other fabrics, and then I keep looking through various tubs of fabrics to find it, and I want to avoid that, and I want to keep everything in one. So that's the first step that I'm going to do. Alright, the tub isn't necessarily full, but I'm sure there's some other kids' fabric that's hiding somewhere. So I'm going to put this aside, and I'm going to start with the next one, which is going to be bottom weight and jacket weight. Now, when it comes to organizing your sewing and creative space, I personally truly believe that it has to be the right fit for you, no matter what anybody else says, no matter how many beautiful organizational pictures you see on Instagram or elsewhere, it has to work for you. So in my personal experience, I don't really care if organization is the prettiest, meaning really pretty containers or really pretty labels. It just has to be highly functional. And it also looks very different depending on what stage of your journey you're in. So for example, years and years ago, I loved storing all of my fabric folded out on the shelves. Then I moved on to a phase where I really loved storing my fabric on the hangers in a closet. And for the last couple of years, I've really implemented this tub system, and so far I'm loving it. Now, while I was working on it, I realized that this tub is going to be enough only for the bottom weights fabric. So this next tub is going to be for jacket weight and sweater weight fabrics. Now, oftentimes I get asked, how do I process the fabric once I bring it home from the shop? And it's really easy and really straightforward. I usually wash it right away, and after it's washed and dried, I sort it into the tub that it belongs to. After sorting out these heavier weight fabrics for jackets and sweaters, I moved on to the blouse weight fabrics. And here I need to tell you that most of my fabrics do come from online shops, which can present a certain challenge. But there's one particular thing that I actually love, and that is that most, not all, but most online fabric shops will place a sticker on your fabric that will tell you the fiber content, what type of fabric that is, the amount of yards, and usually a couple of miscellaneous things like what is the washing method for this particular fabric. And that comes really, really handy. So usually right after the fabric is washed and dried, I place the sticker right back on it for future reference. Alright, so as you can see, I still have some fabric to put away. And you know what? I said that I have 4 tubs, but I didn't realize that I actually have 5 tubs. It's just this 5th one was filled with some projects that I'm still working on, some larger fabric remnants, just kind of like an assortment of things, probably some of the projects that I would finish in the nearest future that I just popped them in here. So I'm going to empty this out and I'm going to use it for the fabric that I have on the table, and then we'll figure out where to put the stuff that was in here. Since that was my last fabric tub, while at it, I decided to sort out the square cubbies as well. Okay, so I do like when my ribbing is all in one place and I can quickly go through it and it's kind of hidden away, so that way I don't have to refold it every single time I'm looking for that right type of ribbing. So I'm just going to drop all of the ribbing that I have in this box, and I think it's going to work really well. I'm using these labels over here. They're not going to stay on really well, but at least for right now, I have sort of like a system going on, and later on I can figure out a better way how to label these bins. Now to summarize, this is what my fabric organization looks like. Oh, right, so the fabric is organized. It was definitely a big project, and it almost looks like I made more mess than actually organized, but it's that thick of it, you know, that messy middle. When you start to work on a garment, on your idea, you're working through it right in the middle of it. It doesn't really look like the final result that you were hoping for. Well, because you're not done yet. So if you push through, you will see the result that you're hoping for. And I did set aside 2 piles of fabric. This pile is that second pass of what we did in the first video, which was decluttering. And most of these are polyester, just fabrics that I'm not happy to use. And this one is one fabric that I need to use ASAP for my daughter, and the other ones, I love the texture and the fabric content of these textiles, but I'm not happy about the color. These were purchased online, and unfortunately I just didn't pick the right color. The fabrics themselves are linen and cotton, French terry, and this is cotton as well. So I hope I can get a second life of them after I dye them a different color. That being said, my next step is going to be this bookshelf, which is going to be a really quick one. So I'm sort of like pairing a really big project with a really small one, because all the books are here to stay. All I have to do is just sort of like stack them neatly, and that's about it. When it comes to the books, I don't necessarily use any organization. I might loosely sort them out by the topic, but that's about it. And here I apply the same principle, that it doesn't matter what anybody else says. What matters is that this organizational style works for you. And for me, that does the job. Alright, this one is going to be a big one because I have more over there, but I have to sort out my self-drafted patterns. And usually, most of the times, I'm actually pretty good at just putting them and labeling them right away, either into my folder or in one of these yellow envelopes. And in the yellow envelopes, I store patterns that I use often, all the time, like for example, bodice blocks, or the patterns that for whatever reason just don't belong in the folders. But there are times when I'm so in a hurry that I just wrap them up like this. I don't even identify what that is at all. And then I just have, you know, multiple rolls like this of pattern drafting paper with pattern on it, and I have no idea what that is. And I also found a full envelope of Barbie clothes patterns from my childhood that my mom used. So I have to figure out how to store those as well because I don't want them to get damaged. So yeah, I have quite a bit of work cut out for me, so let's tackle it. For this part, I simply picked up an extra pack of yellow envelopes so that way I can sort out those loose patterns and perhaps replace some of the other envelopes that are kind of falling apart. Well, I am not sure what this is. It definitely looks like it is some sort of a cardigan, judging by the front. But which cardigan? Don't be like me and mark your pattern pieces. Now when it comes to labeling, I usually use two methods. The simple one is where I grab a label and I stick it in the top corner and I just write down what is the pattern. The more complex one is where I do a line drawing or sometimes a sketch. Now if you are a member of this channel, then you do have these fashion cookies available for you so that way you can sketch out your ideas as well. So definitely check out your members perks. These on the other hand look like shorts for my husband, but this is the front and the question is, where's the back? So let's take a look if there is a back. Okay, hold on. This is a bodice block for my daughter, and this is looks like a pocket for the pants, and this is another front. Wait a second. No! Now obviously I could go a step further and print out a picture to glue on top of every envelope, but for right now, I simply just don't have enough time. However, I also store my patterns in a big folder. There, I do have a picture in front of each of the patterns that corresponds to the same tutorial that I have done previously on the channel. After a little while, I finally got all of my patterns sorted out, and I personally like to store them in a little bin on the bottom of the shelf next to another bin that is dedicated to the future upcycling projects. Speaking of a shelf, in the previous video I did share with you that I decided to take down the office desk that I had in this space. It was just way too big and I only used it as a storage solution for my sewing machines. Instead of that desk, we made a little shelf. It still houses all of my sewing machines on the top, but on the bottom I can also store my filming and video equipment. Alright, so this next one is going to be pretty easy and pretty straightforward because I don't even have to sort it out. In these two tubs, I have my Cricut supplies and my craft and art supplies, and then I store my easel right here on top of it. And because I don't use these supplies as often as I use my sewing supplies like fabric and other things, they always stay very contained and very organized. Now here I also wanted to share with you that I absolutely love these little see-through containers for labels. I have one for buttons, I have one for thread, and I have one for zippers as well. And as you can see, the theme of see-through containers is throughout my workroom, and that is because I'm actually a very visual person, but over the years I have realized that I can't really keep the fabric out on the shelves or have a file system because it just doesn't really work for me in my personal case. So this really serves the purpose where I can see through the containers, but everything is still contained. Alright, now it's time to tackle the pegboard. Now the concept for my personal pegboard is really straightforward. I only have two categories. The first one is items that I use all the time, like for example, let's say scissors. And the second category is items that I use from time to time, but I don't necessarily have any other home in my workspace. A good example for that would be a scissor sharpener. Sometimes it does happen that I have a weird little odd thing that makes its way to the pegboard, or let's say I have an overflow of thread in one of the baskets. So right now is a great time to pare it down and bring it back to what it needs to be. So to give you a quick rundown, this is what I have. A lint roller, bias tape makers, little scissors for intricate cutting. Then I have serger thread, a bit more serger thread, scissor sharpener, pencils, also knitting needles for turning points, and a couple of different glues for either gluing fabric or embellishments or things like that. Then we move forward and I have little pliers and different things for like little jewelry and craft things. Then of course scissors, my drafting rulers, seam allowance tape and painter's tape, as well as a couple of rolls of interfacing. Up here I have all of my measuring tapes, as well as a couple of spools of really sort of unique thread that doesn't really belong anywhere else, like for example a big roll of white Mataflex. On this side I have a tub of assorted elastic. Over here I have an assortment of needles for my sewing machine and a serger, and here I have my hot hem rulers. And of course, last but not least, fabric scraps. Now years back I used to have a solution for my fabric scraps. I would sort them by color and then by fabric type, and I would pack them very neatly. And over the last few years I came to realization that the best solution for my fabric scraps is to have no solution whatsoever. I kid you not. When I work with fabric scraps, which is actually quite often, on camera and off the camera, it just makes no sense for me to neatly stack them and fold them, because I need to go through the fabric scraps so that way I can find the right color, the right texture, the right amount of fabric, and I end up spending more time organizing them than actually sewing with them. Occasionally I will sort them out into little baggies, and usually when I have a very specific project in mind, I will sort out all of the fabric scraps that I want to use for that project into one little bag, so that way I know, do not touch that one. That one is reserved for a particular garment. I also noticed that fabric scraps don't really have a constant place in my sewing room. I used to store them in a plastic bin, then in a basket. Currently, I store it in this little sewing machine tote. It just depends on the amount of the fabric scraps that I have, but for right now, this is the solution. And here it is, this space where I sew, and also the space where I create videos to connect with you, my dear sewing friends. And as you witnessed, it isn't the prettiest, it isn't the fanciest, but the bottom line is that it works for me, and I truly hope that you will find some inspiration in this as well, and you will find the organizational systems in your sewing space that will work for you. Now, if you want to see the first episode of this mini-series, make sure to check the description of this video. And then if you want to see the sewing and the design process of this hoodie, click right over here and you will see my Sew Easy series. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy, thoughtful sewing. Bye!